All right, you modern humans. Today, we'll deliver Methods of Barbarism. If you missed our previous videos, a brief British history lesson, Control of the Cape, not one, but two Boer Wars, and Sir Henry Campbell-Bannerman's life summary, then I highly recommend you check those out before watching this video. All are linked in the description below. This is Speaking Through the Ages, where we bring back the dead in an attempt to bring out the values, beliefs, and internal struggles of those humans that came before. We give context to and deliver historical speeches that motivated people to kill, riot, make salt, and sign papers. I'm Joseph Delisle, your novice history fan. If you are a fan of Speaking Through the Ages, subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Henry Campbell-Bannerman would be elected to the House of Commons in 1868 and would serve in multiple posts until becoming the Liberal Party leader on February 6, 1899. The Second Boer War would start 8 months later, and he had to keep the Liberal Party from splitting. The opinions on the Boer War drove the Liberal Party into two camps: the imperialist dominate the world camp and the pro-Boer, pro-self-government camp. The treatment of women and children in the concentration camps and the scorchers policy started to hit the moral bone of the British people. Emily Hobhouse, who we covered in previous videos, investigated and reported on the condition and death of women and children in those camps. And our boy, Campbell-Bannerman, was her microphone. For this, he would be denounced as a traitor, but would ultimately succeed in holding the party together and become the Prime Minister in 1905. And now, the new rendition of Methods of Barbarism, originally given by Sir Henry Campbell-Bannerman at a meeting of the Scottish Liberal Association in Stirling, Scotland, October 25th, 1901. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your enthusiastic greeting, and I know all that it means. This is the first occasion in which it has been my privilege to attend the annual gathering of the Scottish Liberal Association since you elected me to be your president. And I feel constrained to renew my warm acknowledgement of your kindness and expression of my sincere gratitude for such a proof of your regard and competence. Now, it has become habitual with us at political meetings for some time past to commence by declaring that at present, the war in South Africa overwhelms all other public questions. And it is perfectly true. However urgent may be the necessity for alterations in our laws, however distressing may be the conditions of large masses of our people, however interesting and deserving of consideration and examination may be great social problems, they cannot be adequately examined and discussed while the heart, the thoughts, the intellectual energy of the country are concentrated in South Africa. And this absorption, natural and inevitable as it is, as the days go on, increase in a high ratio. You will not, therefore, be surprised when I tell you that it is of the war, and of the war almost exclusively, that I shall speak to you tonight. We have entered on the third year of the war. Why has it not ended long ago? And when will it end? And why is the end delayed? These are the questions that now every man is asking his neighbor. And well, he may, for they are most grave and serious questions. Every week that the war lasts brings a huge burden of expenditure upon the British Treasury. I cannot refrain from pointing out what we see so clearly now: the flagrant inconsistency which the world outside these shores sees. The flagrant inconsistency and the ground which exists for the accusation of hypocrisy in the course which has been followed. Ought we not to blush? You and I need not blush because, thank goodness, we have no complicity in the matter. But still, our country's character is at stake, and in that sense, we may blush. Ought not, at all events, those who have complicity to blush when they think of our insistency to the very point of war on the sovereign virtue of free representative institutions, of our intolerance of even a year's delay in establishing them in another man's state, while in our own states, old and new, all rights of voting, or speaking, or writing, and almost of thinking are at this moment abolished. We are told, although I never agreed to it, that we ought to defer the consideration of all these matters until after the war is ended. So I will content myself with repeating this unqualified condemnation of what was done by its own author. The fact, at all events, is that the government failed to maintain peace, which they professed to be their object, and war ensued. Now, I come to an important matter. What are we to say of the conduct of the war? We are told, mainly by the same persons who think that we should put off all considerations of the previous negotiations. I say we are told by them that we ought to concentrate our criticism and condemnation, if we find reason to form it, upon the incompetence of the government in their military administration of their war, their misjudgments, their blindness, their helplessness. Certainly, I admit, there is a large field of criticism and ample ground of condemnation, and I am quite willing to take my part in it. They carried their negotiations to the point of war, ignoring the formidable armaments which the Boers had accumulated, of which they had in their war office ample, sufficient information. They had so misread the character of their antagonist that they thought to bluff the Boers, that the Boers would not fight. One minister was astonished to find that they could shoot, and another was surprised to hear that they could ride, while a third expected Switzerland to declare war against us as soon as the Free State. They declined mounted men, preferring foot soldiers. I observe that now one of the great reasons given by them for the long delay in a satisfactory conclusion of the war is that the country is so vast. It is so extensive, equal to France and Spain combined. And also, there are natural advantages which these dreadful men who are opposed to us take the benefit. These all existed 3 years ago. And I'm not aware that a mile has grown any longer in South Africa during these 2 years. In a war, there is something besides the military conduct of a campaign and the provisioning of troops and the furnishing of supplies and the strategy which is to be used. These are matters which military men are much better fitted to judge of than you and I. There is the political conduct of the war. War is not a mere game, a trial of strength and skill between two players to be continued by them until the board is cleared of pieces on one side or the other. It is an instrument, an odious and horrible instrument. But in this imperfect world, it seems to be a necessary instrument, in some cases, for the accomplishment of some political object. What is the political object here? It is the peace, the harmony, the contentment of South Africa under the predominant power of Great Britain. Now, the cardinal fact upon which the whole problem turns is that this is of the nature of a civil war. We are not fighting with a foreign foe whom we are to thrash and overcome and vanquish and punish, and then abandon him and turn our back upon him. These men are to be our neighbors. Nay, they are to be our fellow citizens. Whatever be their faults, whatever be their offenses in the present or in the past against us, if we are to stay in South Africa at all, they will be there. And not only so, but they are indistinguishable from the great majority of our own citizens in our own colonies. Now, anyone who rightly appreciates these facts, what will he say are to be our objects in the war which we have undertaken in South Africa? The first ought to be to impress upon our antagonists our military superiority. And I have always held this to be our first object. But the second is to impress upon them our ultimate and essential friendliness towards them. Take a glance at the present condition of the affairs and see what it promises for future amity and prosperity. Are they the elements to be found for a settlement in the condition to which you have now reduced South Africa? The whole country, in 2 belligerent states outside the mining towns, is a howling wilderness. The farms are burned, the country is wasted, the flocks and herds are either butchered or driven off, the mills destroyed, the furniture and implements of agriculture are smashed. These things are what I have termed methods of barbarism. I adhere to the phrase. I cannot improve upon it. If these are not the methods of barbarism, what methods does barbarism employ? In the time of war, things are not done in a rose-water sort of way. But the universal treatment of a whole country in this way, and the sweeping of women and children into camps, is a process for which I venture to say nothing can furnish justification. When the war is happily ended, and we set about the constitution of this Arcadia, the 50,000 prisoners of war will, of course, return to what by some sort of irony we may perhaps be permitted to call their home. These are the materials for which your new self-government. They will meet the hundreds, thousands of women and children, or the survivors of them. There will not be many children at the present rate. They will meet them, and in what sort of mind towards the British Empire will these men be when the husband meets the wife and hears her story, when the brother meets the sister, and when the father asks in vain for his child? Hitherto, I have spoken of the belligerent states. Now, what of the old colony of the Cape? To what condition has the statesmanship of the government brought it? Martial law, which is in other words, no law. Nothing but the arbitrary rule of soldiers who know nothing of law prevails from end to end of the country. We have reason to believe and to fear that martial law is but a form of undeclared war upon the Dutch population. With all the ordinary guarantees of civil rights suspended, no man is safe in property, in liberty, or in life. The independent press is silenced. So severe are the restrictions on news that we have only partial information. But we have enough to know that hundreds of men, not Dutch only, but many British, have been arrested, thrown into jail, deported to a distance from their homes, tried and condemned by these military tribunals on the evidence, it may be, of spiteful neighbors or political opponents. Why, with what indignation would we denounce such proceedings in other countries? I had a letter yesterday morning from one of the oldest and most robust liberals I know, a man of high experience and acquaintance. Quote, It seems to be thought that freedom is a fair weather kind of thing, very pleasant when the sun shines, but to be cast aside at once when the storm blows." Unquote. Have these ministers of ours not learned that it is not by suppression of civil rights, not by harshness, not by coercion and force in any form that a free people can be kept quiet and contented? How has their policies worked in the colony? It has alienated thousands of both races. It has sapped loyalty. It has turned friends into rebels, and it has filled the ranks of the men in the field against us. And yet they wonder why it is that the war is not concluded. These ministers have succeeded in reducing society in the old prosperous colony to a quagmire. They have revived old enmities and created new ones. They have sown the seeds of lasting discord, and when they, by and by, lay down and discredit their responsibilities, they will leave a new Ireland in the southern seas to be a weakness and a difficulty to the empire. You may end, of course, however discouraging the prospect may be, you may end in preserving your power in South Africa. But how true are the words of Mr. Burke in his famous speech on the conciliation of the American colonies? Read that speech. There is a most extraordinary resemblance between the two cases. The attitude of the ministry at home, the attitude of the colonists abroad, the denouncement as traitors and almost rebels of all who raised their voices against the ministers at home. The whole thing is as a picture of what is happening just now. May heaven avert the omen. Mr. Burke, in this great speech, says, a further objection to force, he was objecting to applying force in any case of this kind, is that you impair the object by your very endeavor to preserve it. The thing you fought for is not the thing you recover, but depreciated, small, wasted, and consumed in the contest. And you may, as I say, preserve your authority in South Africa, but it will be depreciated and lessened and wasted and consumed. Campbell-Bannerman's message traveled all the way to the Boers on the battlefield. When he became prime minister, the Boers trusted him and agreed with him after he conferred self-government on the Transvaal and Orange River colony. We hope you enjoyed this historical moment. For our next speech, Keir Hardie will give the first complete socialist speech in the House of Commons. Thank you for joining. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. See you next time, where the dead teach.